president.
The key announcement today is that we're expanding the Dangote refinery. We're announcing it officially. We're expanding the Dangote refinery from 650,000 barrels per day to 1.4 million barrels per day. Yes. This will make it the largest refinery in the world ever. That is surpassing the Jamnagar Reliance refinery in India. This expansion reflects our confidence in Nigeria's future, our belief in Africa's potential, and our commitment to building energy independence for our continent and the world.
He's quick to heap the inspiration of his expansion drive on President Tinubu's energy policies.
Of course, it is the dream of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, for Nigeria to emerge as one of the major suppliers of petroleum products in Africa and part of the world. And with his strong backing through previous stated policies, we are now taking this challenge to make this happen.
If you knew what you were made of, then we would save the world.
What's going on, people? Welcome to the King Mono Show. So, for the longest time, I have been a massive fan of Aliko Dangote. He is well renowned as the world's richest black man, I believe, with wealth that I think now is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, quick caveat to that note, I know quite a lot of Nigerians. You know, I've got a lot of Nigerian friends who do very well and who are involved in certain circles, and I've been to certain places and they will dispute that Aliko Dangote is the richest man in Nigeria. They will argue there are actually richer people in Nigeria, richer families in Nigeria who essentially just fly beneath the radar, are probably a lot more clandestine and selfish with their funds, and hence never heard of them. Corruption in Nigeria goes a long way, and some people would argue there are trillionaire families in Nigeria. Now, I'm not going to argue for or against that. I don't have enough data on me, but I would say the jury's out. Certainly, I've been convinced enough through conversations that I've had that actually there are perhaps richer people in Nigeria than Aliko Dangote. However, that's a complete aside because we are focused on him today. And for the most part, I've always been a fan. He built a lot of wealth through his concrete and construction materials business and manufacturing that and shipping that all over Africa, not just in Nigeria. So he's a massive part in terms of African development. And obviously, more recently, in recent decades at least, the oil refinery wealth he's moved into. Now, it's important to note that in terms of his backstory, I believe that it is relatively accepted that he's not a rags to riches story. This is someone who comes from relative wealth, and anyone who has family or a history in politics in Nigeria comes from wealth. In Nigeria, wealth comes from politics. The wealthiest families are the ones involved in politics because Nigeria has a massive corruption issue, and it is very real. It's not hyperbole when it's mentioned in the media in regards to how corrupt Nigeria's government is. It's very corrupt, and there is a lot of money that is essentially siphoned out, which is why Nigeria's infrastructure remains so dilapidated to this very day, because essentially nothing ever gets brought to fruition. However, that is not the topic of this video either. Okay, what the topic of this video is Aliko Dangote, who is potentially this almost savior figure for Nigerians. And in his recent move to build refineries, I say recent because the refineries are built and are actually exporting oil as we speak, refined petroleum, I should say, not oil. They're exporting refined petroleum. So the backstory is that Nigeria for the longest time has been selling its unrefined product to the rest of the world, and then around the rest of the world they've been utilizing their own refineries to convert this crude oil into refined products such as, you know, petroleum, gasoline, diesel, whatever it is. But they've been refining this crude oil and turning it into what is the more profitable product. Now, countries that actually make a lot of money from the oil wealth, such as, you know, in the Gulf regions, you look at nations like Bahrain and Qatar, Switzerland, countries that actually make a lot of money from the oil have their own refineries, and they turn it into the finished product, which is petroleum, and then they ship that out to customers around the world. And Nigeria has tried to do this. It's not like this is never been attempted before. It's been decades that Nigeria has been attempting to build their own refineries unsuccessfully. They nationalize refineries. Now, there's a long story as to why Nigeria's attempts to build its refineries have continually failed. Okay, many people point to corruption, but you could also point to outside interference. There are many stories of sabotage in these kind of like attempts for Nigeria to build their own refineries. Clearly, we have huge obstacles and very powerful enemies that do not want Africa, particularly Nigerians, to be able to refine their own oil, because there's a lot that's tied to Nigeria refining its own oil. And this is one of the reasons why this has never happened. But in steps Aliko Dangote. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because his refinery, which has been completed and obviously is still under construction, still has some things to work through. We know that he kind of like shipped the tanker out recently and it was rejected by the EU because it was a tanker of diesel, and it was rejected because it didn't meet EU standards. It was something to do with it going to a cold country, and it wasn't suitable for consumption within cold climates. Now, this could just be corruption and their attempt to sabotage, you know, Africa's attempts at self-reliance, or it could be very legitimately, you need to make better quality product. The bottom line is, whatever kind of stipulations they put in there, I'm sure that Dangote's refineries will be able to meet that standard, meet that regulation. I don't think it's going to be a possibility. I think it'll be absolutely fine.
During the visit, Aliko Dangote denied reports that petroleum products from his refinery are substandard. The delegation was led by the Speaker, Tajuddin Abbas, and the Deputy, Benjamin Kalu. On the claims of substandard products, Dangote said the team tested diesel bought from 2 filling stations, and that from his refinery at the refinery's laboratories. It has also emphasized that substandard petroleum products are being imported into the country and sold to unsuspecting Nigerians.
My issue more lies with what the relationship between Dangote's refineries and Nigeria is. Because it's very clear, if we have nationalized refineries. So if you look at nations in the Middle East like Qatar, they have a nationalized refinery. Now, they didn't build this themselves. Their refinery, actually, Qatar Gas, was actually for a large part operated by American organizations like ExxonMobil. Between Qatar and American organizations, the oil's owned, or at least the refineries are owned half and half. So obviously these American organizations are making huge amounts of money. As rich as Qatar is, there's people that we don't even know their names making the same money as the GDP being generated by that nation. So we know there's partnerships that it takes to create these refineries, but on the other hand, when it's nationalized, that money goes into the treasury, and then that treasury is able to use it to enrich the nation. However, my issue with Dangote's refineries, as much as they're in Nigeria, is how does this benefit the Nigerian people? Because if he's going to build refineries in Nigeria, but then charge Nigerians the same amount that Nigerians were paying the West, but then that's all going to his pocket, unless he's got a plan for the redistribution of that wealth, which he doesn't have an obligation to do, being a private organization, how does this benefit, or how is this going to benefit Nigerians, the Nigerian economy, etc., etc.? Is there going to be guarantees about the amount of subsidies that Nigerians are going to be given in terms of how much they pay for petrol, or are Nigerians going to be paying more at the pump or the same amount at the pump that they're paying at the moment? Is there going to be any redistribution of this massive amount? Because, you know, Nigeria's biggest import is petroleum by a long shot. So their biggest import is petroleum. How is this going to benefit the Nigerian economy? So that's the question marks that I had, or at least I have, regarding this relationship between Dangote's refineries and the Nigerian people. I want to know that it's actually going to be a benefit, since it's not a nationalized project. One of the biggest concerns I have is this relationship, the financial relationship, the economic relationship that's going to exist between a privately owned firm, essentially refining all of Nigeria's oil, and the Nigerian people. Because if it's a national endeavor, then it's very, very clear. Like the nation has funded it. The nation will benefit from every penny. That's why we're able to do subsidies. When I used to live in Qatar, for instance, you know, petrol was 5 pence per litre. 5 pence per litre. That's how much petrol was, because it's kind of like, well, now it's nowhere near that price in Nigeria. Yes, it's still subsidized. Yes, it's still a lot cheaper than it is here in England, for instance, but it's still relatively expensive. Nigerians, you know, are at the pumps and they are struggling to put, you know, petrol in their cars. It's not cheap. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, and it should be in an oil producing nation. So these are some of the question marks that exist. Now, I do know that NNPC, which is the national organization that kind of controls the distribution of crude oil and petrol, they own 7%, I believe, of Dangote's refinery, and with an option to increase it to 20%. But they had to buy that stake, which I think is okay. But once again, what is the agreement? Is Dangote buying the crude oil from Nigeria? Like, there's a lot of kind of like question marks that I have, and I just need to know that at the end of this entire experiment, when these refineries are up and running, is everything going to look really different for the Nigerian people, or is everything going to be the same? It's going to be much of the same, but now we just have a really rich Nigerian person and or family and or organization operating in Nigeria, which has its benefits by itself. Now, the good thing is I actually found an article which seems to answer some of these questions. So I kind of just want to go through that article with you guys. I found this video as well, but I'm now thinking that I might tackle this video at another time. I want to just go through this article with you guys, because I think this article did answer a few of these question marks that I had regarding this relationship between Dangote and the Nigerian people, and how essentially his refineries can benefit the Nigerian economy. For many of you, I'm sure this will be, I know this already, not telling me anything new. But for me, it was important to take this question and have the answer laid out in front of me, so that I can decide I'm going to really fully get behind this, or I'm going to partially get behind this and hold on to these quid pro quos, hold on to these protest points to ensure that what is delivered is beneficial for the African people. So anyway, let's get into this article. The impact of Dangote refinery on the Nigerian economy. Okay, so let's go through this, and this is written by, here we go, Afola B. Olowokere. He's a PhD anyway, smart fella. Yeah, okay, so let's read through this together. The Nigerian Ports Authority has also commenced the implementation of the federal government's directive to coordinate surface provision from all regulatory, security and other stakeholders for the smooth implementation of the initiative to sell crude oil and petroleum products to the Dangote refinery in Naira. NNPC's share in Dangote refinery, which was initially 20%, has been decreased to 7% due to payment and other strategic reasons. Now that is a concern. That's a concern. Let's go on to that. I think there's that includes an option to re-increase it again, but that is concern. What I'd like to know the kind of ins and outs of that. So let's look at the impact of the Dangote oil refinery. This is really the important part. How does it actually impact is going to impact the everyday Nigerian, and by extension Africans. The refinery is expected to positively affect many sectors and aspects of the Nigerian economy. Okay. And remember, this is absent from the fact that this is nationally owned. It's not nationally owned. The national ownership of this refinery is only 7%. That's not a lot. It's not massive. So the ability for Nigerians to exploit the revenue that comes from selling this petrol is being broadly reduced. Now, obviously, this refinery will be, I'm assuming in this world, purchasing the crude oil. So Nigeria is still going to get money from, exports, so to speak, but it won't be exports. It'll be selling to a domestic customer. Now, the impact on that is, I think when Nigeria normally sells, it has to sell in dollars. So as a result, the Nigerian economy even doesn't really benefit that much because it's not receiving that money in naira. But then there is that, if it is going to utilize that money in Nigeria, it's going to purchase naira. However, with this transaction, when they're purchasing the crude from Nigeria, it's being purchased in naira. So this increase in naira activity, so to speak, should benefit the foreign exchange rate of the naira. So there is that. The oil refining subsector of the manufacturing industry has been on the negative growth side for a couple of years now due to poor functioning of the country's refinery. Dangote Refinery, which has a capacity of 650,000 barrels per day, is expected to meet 100% of Nigeria's demand for refined petroleum products and have a surplus for export. This can in turn boost industrialization by supplying refined products to various sectors. It will improve the performance of the manufacturing sector with the 14 subsectors underneath it, thereby enhancing the output of the manufacturing sector. GDP growth. The operation of Dangote Refinery would lead to the creation of thousands of direct and indirect jobs. Hopefully that will keep in the hands of Nigerians and will not place in the hands of foreigners, I would hope. This can have significant impacts on the economy, including stimulating economic growth, increasing tax revenues, improving fiscal stability and reducing inflation, which is also very beneficial. This can have significant positive impacts on the economy. Okay, that's the same. With reduced imports and the potential for export of surplus refined products from Dangote Refinery, Nigeria's trade balance is expected to improve. So I spoke about that already. So the fact that we're reducing imports, okay, and therefore, there's more activity within the naira. This would contribute positively to GDP growth and economic stability. Improved investments in the upstream, midstream and downstream subsectors will facilitate growth. The reduction in fuel subsidies, which the government spends heavily on, could free up fiscal resources for other developmental projects. So this is quite a key one. Okay, I do question how we get here, because at the moment the government spends or subsidizes fuel as it should do, but it's limited how much it can subsidize it because of Nigeria's massive dependency on import. So Nigeria is importing all of this petrol. Okay, they're not refining it at home by themselves, and therefore essentially because they're in control of that industry, they could essentially give that away, like we see in the Middle East, where it's 5 pence per litre for petrol in Qatar, for instance. Okay, they can do that because they refine their own product, and then they have the option to sell the product for a high price to the rest of the world by almost giving it away to their own people. This is a privately owned facility. So the privately owned facility doesn't allow for the giving away of petrol to the Nigerian people. It doesn't even necessarily allow for the heavy subsidizing of the petrol. So we have to understand what the pricing relationship is. What is going to be the pricing relationship between Dangote's refineries and the Nigerian people? Is there something baked into the fact that maybe there's a crude oil pricing agreement that's being given to Dangote so that then they can pass that benefit on to the Nigerian people before exporting to the rest of the world? These are some of the questions that need to be answered so we understand how it benefits the Nigerian people. And it says here, the extent of this benefit depends on how fuel pricing is managed. Demand and supply of Forex. Nigeria is an import-dependent nation, with refined petroleum being the most imported product. Increased production and export of refined petroleum can generate foreign exchange earnings for the country, thereby increasing the supply of dollars in the foreign exchange market. Okay, because the trading of petrol is priced in dollars, we'll now have a load of dollars flooding into Nigeria. Now, where Nigeria can use this to this benefit is if it then uses those dollars to purchase naira. Okay, if naira is purchased with this revenue, then this is going to have an almost immediate effect on the power of the naira. Okay, one of the biggest reasons why the naira continues to keep falling and have this massive hyperinflation, is the only way to describe it, is because of Nigeria's hunger, its desire for the dollar. Nigerians don't want to trade in naira. Nigerians don't want to purchase in naira. The country almost has to force them to keep everything in naira. Because the naira is so volatile, people want to put their money into something that is more stable. They would prefer to have their money in dollars. So there's this constant, and all of that is predicated, or at least it exists, because of the petrodollar, because of Nigeria's need to purchase loads and loads and loads of dollars in order to buy or import petroleum. Okay, it has to be done in dollars. So Nigeria's got this thing where it's constantly selling the naira, and it's driving down the purchasing power of the naira in order to import petroleum. With Nigeria now producing this petroleum in-house, they won't need to be purchasing those dollars. They can literally do this entire trade in naira, and also even the dollars that they are receiving from other nations as well, they can be converting that to naira. So this is one of the big benefits that I actually didn't see before. I was just kind of seeing private organization. I don't like the look of that. How is Nigerians going to benefit? But actually, one of the big benefits that we might be able to see from these refineries is Nigeria's foreign exchange, is Nigeria's exchange rate, is the naira. The naira could get a lot stronger as a result of this, if it's managed well. One of the compound effects of this refinery is the constant purchasing of the naira. So if we can purchase naira as a result of receiving these dollars, these petrodollars from around the world, and then also internally make sure that all those transactions that take place between Dangote and the Nigerian government and the Nigerian people, all of these transactions are done using the naira, the purchasing power of naira will compound almost immediately, and we should see an instant strengthening of the naira, which would be an amazing thing. I think one of the things about our neighbor, Nigeria's neighbor, Ghana, the cedi is a very, very stable currency. In fact, it actually grew against the dollar. I think in the last year, or maybe even the last couple of years, it's actually grown against the dollar. This is the kind of strength that we want to see in the naira, and I think it's very, very possible. It's very, very plausible that this could happen. But it's going to take that. It's going to take something like this, anything to reduce this need to import, and this also reduce this hunger amongst Nigerians to basically get out of the naira. If they feel they can stay in the naira for, as a stable currency, and not essentially just see their wealth diving month after month because the naira continues to weaken against other world currencies, particularly the dollar, then that will be very beneficial. And I think this could very well catalyze it. This one initiative has the power to catalyze a reversal in the fortunes of the naira. With Dangote refinery producing PMS locally, the need for importation decreases. This reduces the demand for foreign currency used to pay for imports, potentially easing pressure on Nigeria's foreign exchange reserves. The reduced need for foreign currency to import refined products could lead to a strengthening of the naira, as fewer dollars will be required for these transactions. And then this in turn can improve the overall balance of payments. Now, this is one of the biggest, to me personally, this is one of the biggest benefits that this refinery is going to have. It's a massive benefit, especially if we can put in some policies to mandate how the Naira is going to be utilized in these transactions. That's going to be key. Money market, increase in lending opportunities. Banks may see increased demand for loans from businesses involved in the supply chain of the refinery, including construction, logistics and distribution. So we're just talking about, essentially industry concentration and inertia, seeing industries being developed around the refinery. The refinery won't sit in isolation. It will need employees. The employees will probably want to live in and around the facility itself. You'll probably need hotels around the facility itself. You'll need to build roads and all of these other things around the facility itself. And then there's all these other extra industries, the transportation, the building of roads. There's just so many different industries that are going to develop the infrastructure of Nigeria as a result of it having essentially the biggest refinery in the world. It's a big deal. Deposits and investments. With the refinery's operations, there could be an influx of deposits as local businesses thrive, leading to more capital available for banks to lend. Liquidity changes. The influx of capital and financial activity related to the refinery could lead to increased liquidity in the financial markets. And interest rates. Depending on demand for financing and the central bank's monetary policy response, interest rates could be influenced by changes in money supply and demand. So a bit of a monetary policy there. I'm not sure exactly how this directly affects monetary policy. This one feels a little bit loose, because monetary policy and the refinery seem like two separate things. I guess the chain that's being made there is to do with the loans. If there's an increased desire for loans, perhaps there could be an agreement, a governmental agreement. Although I'm not sure how answerable the Bank of Nigeria is to the Nigerian government. It's not like over here in England, where the Bank of England and the House of Parliament kind of work hand in hand to control the British economy. I'm not sure if that's the policy in Nigeria, but if they could come to some kind of agreement in terms of making loans affordable, making credit affordable to businesses around this expansion of trade, then that would be a good thing. Stock market. Dangote revealed that the group intends to list Dangote Petroleum, Refinery and Petrochemicals and Dangote Fertilizer Limited on the Nigerian Exchange Group in the first quarter of 2025. I would not like to see any foreign people own stock in this company, because that defeats the purpose. If Dangote's facility essentially just gets bought out by Shell or BP, if it goes on a public exchange where foreign people can invest in it, then we're back at square one. It doesn't make any sense. So I would like to, this needs to be reviewed heavily. Listing of the $20 billion Dangote refinery. I mean, it should be worth more than $20 billion. But anyway, the $20 billion Dangote refinery will also represent opportunities for increased market depth, liquidity and investment engagement. A successful refinery could also improve the overall performance of the energy sector, attracting more investments and potentially leading to bullish market trend. See, this is all a bit loose here. Major recent listing on the Nigerian exchange. MTN in 2019 added about 1.83 trillion naira to the stock market capitalization. I mean, I'm aware of this, but I don't think, this is the thing, I don't think a refinery and a petrochemical company requires this. And I think it's in Nigeria's interest to not have this owned by unknown venture capitalists, in particular foreign ones. Even if it's owned domestically, we don't want it owned domestically by, the same corrupt people who had the ability to build this and didn't. So this is concerning. This is really concerning. I don't like this. I would like to see that reviewed. I prefer the ownership of this to remain between, Dangote and perhaps the NNPC, or Dangote and the Nigerian government and Nigerian people. This having kind of like foreign shareholders, this doesn't make any sense. It's a security issue, and it does. Yeah, I don't like the sound of that. Fiscal sustainability, direct tax revenue. Over time, Dangote's refineries tax payment will be a substantial part of the government revenue. Now, this one as well, that one needs a review, to me personally, because the agreements need to be long term here, and we shouldn't be looking short term on kind of like making tax money. Okay, this is at the end of the day, this company is going to exist and it's going to thrive because of oil that's being taken from the ground beneath Nigeria's soil. So it's better that you have long-term trade. It's better that you have long-term agreements in terms of pricing, so that it remains beneficial and it continues to grow Nigeria's economy and continues to provide opportunity for the Nigerian people, than short-term tax revenue that's only going to make, we all know that tax in Nigeria goes into the pockets of a few. Okay, so that's one of the things that I would, this is like, this for other people and other nations that aren't Nigeria, the potential of tax revenue is exciting. For Nigerian people, tax revenue is not an exciting thing because they never see it. Indirect tax revenue, businesses that will be connected and growth with the refinery will also pay taxes. Okay, so yeah, once again, efficient subsidy management. It will likely reduce unofficial subsidy spending by the government, facilitate a market-based arrangement, correctly gauge domestic demand, reduce leakages, and efficiently allocate subsidy savings. So this is one of the things I'm talking about needs to be managed. This needs to be the primary area. Okay, how is the subsidy for Nigerian people in terms of petrol going to work? What price are the Nigerian people going to sell crude oil to Dangote for? Okay, because that does whether or not this plant is private, but the crude oil that's pulled from beneath Nigeria's soil is not. That still needs to be outside the control of this refinery. And so that's where there's room to have this kind of agreement, okay, where it has a very long-term benefit for the Nigerian people. Refineries competition. This may push the government to start working on own refineries. Well, hopefully that's potential, there's potential for that, but it also could make the government very lazy. So there's potential for both. Improved infrastructure spend and development. There will be increased spending for public investment in terms of infrastructure. Improved social investments, savings from fuel subsidy can be reallocated to other sectors, for example, health, education, infrastructure as expenditure, less borrowing. I mean, the reason I'm kind of like glossing over this is because this all relies on the efficient management of income by the treasury, and this is just the problem that we have in Nigeria. A country that still doesn't have consistent energy, consistent electricity being distributed around the nation, constant power cuts. These are things that everyone knows could easily be resolved with less corruption. Okay, and the issue is that every time money is partitioned to resolve these issues, it's siphoned and fleeted away and corruptly pulled out to the point where it never ever reaches where it's supposed to get to. So this is why I'm kind of like a little bit laissez-faire about these alleged social investments that are going to happen. I just want to see it codified into the agreements between the price, and I think that's where the key is really. If we can codify it into these pricing agreements, how much they're going to sell the crude for, what the exchange policy is going to be, what currencies is going to be used, and then how the subsidy is going to work, what price the refined petrol is going to be sold to the Nigerian people for. Fix that, codify that. Once again, define very clearly what currency is being used for those transactions, and have some rules about the revenue that's being raised by this organization, and Naira being purchased as a result of those revenues, and reducing the demand of the dollar in Nigeria. These are the things that need to all work together as a part of these agreements. These are the things that need to be codified to ensure that it's a long-term net positive for the Nigerian people, this refinery. All of these kind of like almost kind of like very what's the word? All of these theoretical benefits, like, oh well, it might encourage the Nigerian government to finally finish their refineries. That's fear. That's neither here nor there. We need tangible deliverables from this actual refinery that's being built, and agreements that actually benefit the Nigerian people. I really don't like the sound of it being publicly listed with the ability for anybody to buy shares in it, because we know that it's going to be the same players who are going to be interested in it. Okay. Estimates from our macroeconomic model shows that without Dangote Refinery, Nigeria's GDP will be expected to be 3.34% in 2024 and rose to 4.13% in 2030. With Dangote's cement, it is projected... Cement? What does it mean, refinery? Oh, maybe the refinery is called cement, I don't know. With Dangote cement, it is projected to record 4.15% in 2024 and rise to 6.21% in 2030. Hence, the refinery will positively and hugely impact the economy. NNPC stake and sole buyer agreement. NNPC holds an equity stake in Dangote Refinery, which allows NNPC to collaborate closely with Dangote in refining operations and decision making, as should be the case. This raises concerns about market competitiveness, pricing power, and dependency risks. Well, there also needs to be, yes, there is that kind of, market competitiveness, pricing power, dependency risk, but there also needs to be accountability, and there needs to be regulationary restraints on this organization, because ultimately it's dealing with a national product and there's no getting away from that. Oil marketers, import preference. Oil marketers, especially those already used to and gaining from the status quo, will need some time to change and embrace this change. Of course, so we're talking essentially about the West going from a supplier to a customer in terms of the refined oil product. This is going to create conflict. And we know this is the case with President Trump, I think, basically turning into a pirate and stealing Nigerian and Venezuelan oil through violence. Once again, the West doing what the West do and essentially getting away with it. Current situation is forcing the refinery to explore international markets, exporting the majority of its refined products. We can see here that, for instance, the US seizing Nigerian-owned supertanker for suspected oil theft. Without going into this story into too much detail, you can read out for yourself, but essentially the US accused this tanker, which is Nigerian-owned but registered in the US Marshall Islands, but basically of flag switching, because it was allegedly flying the flag of Guyana, apparently, and it was doing that, and it was, that basically proves that they were stealing something. Okay, they've stolen the oil. The world kind of knows what the West is doing here. They're resorting to violence in order to maintain dominance in the region of oil imports and exports. So this is what we know we're going to be up against. Crude oil sale in Naira. The elimination of large foreign exchange demands by oil marketers will ease pressure on the Naira, helping to stabilize and potentially strengthen the currency. However, it will make the refinery the most significant user/demand of the country's foreign exchange. Once again, I think there needs to be regulation on that. They can't just be essentially dumping Naira for dollars, which many private organizations would probably like to do, which is one of the reasons Nigeria has this problem with the fall in naira, is because everybody who gets into a position of wealth doesn't want to hold naira. So this is why I think a company that has so much of its product is based on Nigerian resource, coming from the ground of Nigeria, there needs to be regulation over the way it deals with its forex. It needs to be regulation on how it trades its currency, and those kind of controls can be put in place because it really has the ability to stabilize or destabilize the naira, and that's why it needs to be regulated, in my view. The key question on how much will Dangote's petrol cost needs to be answered transparently and immediately. The cost is important, and this is why that agreement needs to be made in terms of what is being charged for the crude oil and what he charges the Nigerian people. That needs to be dealt with almost like it was a national organization, and it needs to be codified and written into stone that he can't change his mind about that. And there also needs to be kind of like minimum supply agreements in place as well. Otherwise, this really does have the potential of just having zero benefit to the Nigerian people, other than just the boast of saying, hey, look, we've got a refinery in Nigeria, but its ownership is on the stock exchange and it's owned by foreign nationals, and we get charged just as much as we did for importing petrol, and Dangote is getting rich, and all of these private investors are getting rich, and we don't have any subsidized petrol being offered to the Nigerian people, and the naira continues to fall because this refinery doesn't even like to keep any of its funds in the naira. These are the potential problems, which I think can be fixed with regulation, and that needs to be agreed ASAP. While Nigerians expect that the products should come at a cheaper price, market realities such as global oil prices, cost of oil supply and refining margins will make it unlikely, especially in the short term. And I don't think that needs to be the case. We have case studies in other countries, particularly, like I said, the Middle Eastern nations, where they are quite happy to essentially give away their product to their local population. They understand the need for that benefits the nation exponentially. Nigeria needs to start looking at things, even like, look at Dirty December, for instance. Loads of people, tourism is big and growing in Nigeria. People want to come here. If you want people to, Nigeria could be a massive tourist nation. Nigeria has masses of coastline, has beautiful year-round weather, has the potential for a really excellent infrastructure and being a really attractive tourist destination. Nigeria needs to think long term about that, about making the nation an attractive nation. So one of the things that they've understood, at least in the Middle East, is that, and obviously I'm not going to talk about the benefit they have of having smaller population and a much more simplistic backstory and not years of occupation and people trying to assassinate their leaders, etc. I don't know, all of that aside. But one of the things that they do understand is that when you build your local population, when you build your nation, when you make your nation attractive, tourism is actually a really important part of actually developing a nation, regardless of if you don't need the tourism as a product. You should build it because that's all a part of developing your infrastructure, making your nation attractive to invest in. It kind of goes hand in hand. So this idea that, petrol prices go up and that's a reality, is really unlikely that, Nigerians are going to see a fall in petrol price. That's ridiculous. Nigerians can and should expect to receive petrol cheaper as a result of this. That should be a part of it. That should be baked into this agreement, because that ultimately is only going to benefit this organization and the country as a whole if that is the case. So I don't like this kind of flippancy, kind of like, it's very unlikely that's going to happen. I don't like that at all. It should happen. It should be a part of the agreement. It should be key to the agreement that it's going to drive industry, it's going to drive growth, it's going to drive so many things if we can make sure that this refinery truly benefits the Nigerian people. I just wanted to read that article through for you guys. I hope that's been somewhat informative. I want to hear from you guys, particularly if you're in and around the region, or if you're just particularly well read on the subject. How do you feel about Dangote's refineries? How do you feel about the potential for them? How do you feel about the relationship between the refineries and the Nigerian people? Is it a net good? Is it great? Is it something that we should back fully? What are the question marks? I want to know everything that you're thinking, because like I said, I wouldn't say I'm on the fence. I'm definitely pro it, but I want to make sure that safeguards are set up around it so that it's not just another experiment that benefits the few in Nigeria. We have so few things that happen in Nigeria that actually benefit the entire population or benefit the populace as a whole. And I know that's very complex in a nation like Nigeria, with so many ethnic groups and so many issues in and around, you know, ethnocentrism, tribalism. I know all of these things exist, but I do think there's the potential here to do something great for Nigeria, and I just want to make sure it's done. So I know this has been a long video of me rambling a lot, so I want to hear from you now. Get in the comments, tell me, how do you feel about this subject? Yeah, just leave it at that. Peace.
If you know what you